Okay, I'm back. Today's Cinco de Mayo, so I'm gonna celebrate it by doing the redemptions video finally. So as I was planning it out, I decided to look up some articles and stuff about characters who have been redeemed in a good way and some who have been redeemed in a bad way. And then here's some that I'm mixed about. I'm only mixed about two of them, but I'll get to the mixed ones in a minute. But first, before I talk about the bad ones, the mixed ones, and the good ones, I want to tell you some tips and tricks on how to redeem a character. So here it goes. So step one on how to redeem a character is basically to get them some form of tragedy. And don't just have it be a petty excuse or something like that. That's not a real tragedy. And another way that someone else could count as tragic is basically like, being abused, being somewhat insecure about themselves. Those are arguably much better reasons, like, oh, you stole my spotlight or something like that. So, but sometimes having their spotlight stolen can count as an insecurity, but just not that good of an excuse for villainy. Like just stick with being abused or their species dying down or like their own race dying down in numbers. Like for example, like imagine I'm the only Croatian left, and I were to become a villain because of that. Yeah, imagine that. Okay, I'm gonna cut the steps a little short because I don't want to go over every single step because writing a redemption for a villain or an antagonist is completely difficult. So I'm going to cut it to 3 simple steps. Then I'll move on to the examples of bad, good, and mixed redemptions. Now for step 2, I have signs. So what is this step about? Okay, this is a step from an article I think they missed, is that if you're going to redeem someone, at least give them signs that they will change. Don't just have them do anything too unforgivable and just redeem them. Heck, that's another reason that redemptions be forced nowadays, because they can do something really bad but not really get arrested or like killed off or something, which in both scenarios that would actually be karma, not them just randomly redeeming themselves and then apologizing. Apologizing really isn't enough for a redemption at all. So I recommend that you have to get them some signs. And speaking of punishment, that does remind me of step 3. For the third and final step, I decided to cut the steps really short. But if you feel like redeeming them isn't like worth it at the end, just give them a proper punishment or something, like putting them behind bars, have them sacrifice themselves. Like regardless if they die or not, like a sacrifice is still fine. Because sometimes people do actually redeem a villain just to avoid having them killed off. Sometimes sacrificing is a pretty like terrible move when it comes to redeeming themselves. Because the actions beforehand, they could go really long with their unforgivable stuff. So sometimes sacrificing is not that good of a thing. So now I got all 3 steps out of the way, let me provide you guys some of the bad redemptions that I know. So for some bad redemptions I wrote some of these down. So I'm going to go off a little bit on the list. I have a total of 13 terrible redemptions. And 3 of them I'm going to mention are literally from the same show. Surprisingly enough. But I'm going to start off with White Diamond. As White Diamond is all the way at the top of my list on the bad redemptions list. Let's get, well, how is White Diamond's redemption terrible? Well, from what I heard, White Diamond has been torturing some of the other gems and's been corrupting them. And then for some reason, Cartoon Network decided to just redeem her out of nowhere. I feel like her excuse for villainy wasn't that good either for it to really make up for her actions. Heck, and I heard that after like, you know, everything she's done, Steven is still traumatized for what White Diamond has done. And I did hear, according to the Inconsistently a Marble wiki, Steven would sometimes attack White Diamond. Because sometimes he does let his trauma get the best of him. But at this point, it's understandable. Because her actions are too unforgivable for it to count as a good redemption anyway. Okay, so I have more redemptions. But I feel like this is probably the most overrated example on the list. Catra from She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. Probably one of the worst examples of a DreamWorks redemption. And like I said, this redemption is overrated. Like, I get Adora and Catra do make a good couple and all, but like, this one was just stupid. Like, her actions are too unforgivable. Like, plus she's been abusive in the past and tried to destroy the world. Although to be fair, there is one. This might be hypocritical, as I know one character who's redeemed in a good way who also tried to destroy the world. But hey, the franchise he comes from trying to destroy the world is a common thing. I think y'all can guess who that is. Given he's a villainous benchmark. Unlike her, who's inconsistently heinous. If she didn't redeem herself, I feel she would have been close to pure evil. Also, let's go over a few more. Janja. Okay, as much as I like Janja, sadly, his redemption is pretty mediocre because despite how he did give some signs, it's also implied he loves Jasiri. He's been hunted for the Pride Lands numerous times. And then for some reason, he somehow became bored of doing it. Not gonna lie, even I can agree he's somewhat better off as a villain. Not gonna lie. And speaking of villains and antagonists that are poorly redeemed, Darman antagonists. I need to explain how Darman antagonists are poorly done. Because Darman doesn't give any clear, hints or signs that people are going to change. So they could just remain evil and just get some comeuppance and nothing would change. And I'm not gonna lie, as much as horrible as Darman might seem to some, he's a masterpiece. His videos are a masterpiece compared to the knockoffs. Yeah, since at least Darman doesn't use stereotypes just for a joke. Or just to make people laugh. Even these jokes aren't supposed to be serious. And tomorrow's teachings. Just a mere example of those knockoffs of Darman. But some other villains who had terrible redemptions were like Chloe, who was basically irredeemable since Thomas is probably one of the worst show writers ever. He also redeemed Felix and Gabriel for no reason. For the former, he was already bad to begin with, kind of, but for the latter, he had him sacrifice himself to reshape the universe. And speaking of why I said that Thomas was a terrible show writer, is that Gabriel doesn't even want his son knowing that he's Hawkmoth, which is stupid as he's his son. He deserves to know that. Even the Pure Good Wiki themselves agree that Adrian deserves to know that. Okay, that's enough. That's enough. Move on to the mixed redemptions, please. So now we're on to redemptions that I'm pretty mixed with when it comes to how they were redeemed. And those are Movie Knuckles and Zarina. For the former, I'm less mixed with because this one is at least okay. And we all know why Knuckles is even redeemed. Because the whole point of Movie Knuckles is that he's supposed to be on Sonic's side. And the reason I'm mixed with it is that despite how he did redeem himself, he didn't really regret anything. Yeah, he never felt bad for even being hurtful to Sonic or even the damage he's done. And for Zarina, the reason I'm mixed with Zarina's redemption is that she only appears in one movie. One movie. I mean, yeah, sure, she did the right thing by going against Hook and, restoring the talent and all, but, like, I don't think this is really enough given she only appeared in one film. She doesn't even reappear in The Legend of the Never Beast. She probably won't even appear in the future ever again. This is probably the only, like, redemption that Disney's ever done that I'm pretty much mixed with. And by the way, I put on a full list of the redemptions for each category. If you know any other redemptions that are bad or good that I did forget to include, it's because they originate from something I've never watched. So I sincerely apologize if I left something out. I'm just going off with some mere examples, or just things that I've watched in general. So, next, we're moving on to the good redemption. So we're finally on to the final part of the video, and that's the good redemptions. And I wrote down a lot of them. Almost, if not all of them, also originated from something I did watch. But there's only like one redemption on the list. But that one is from something I didn't watch. That was The Last Airbender. And if you are a part of The Last Airbender community, you should know one of these examples right off the bat. So the top 3 examples I do have are Darth Vader, Vegeta, and Zuko. Yeah, celebrate Last Airbender community. Because I just mentioned Zuko. No, seriously, I've never watched The Last Airbender, yet I heard he's redeemed in such a good way. I feel like I'm spoiling it for myself for a weird reason. Like I said, it's clearly obvious how Darth Vader's redemption is good. Vegeta's is pretty good. Zuko's is pretty good. Like, those are 2 self-explanatory, so I'll skip over to some of the other ones. Remember how I said there was also a franchise where trying to destroy the world was a common thing? Well, one of those other good redemptions I'm talking about, this might be hypocritical, but I'm going to say that Shadow's redemption was pretty good. Specifically in the video game incarnation. The movie incarnation's good and all, but like, this one's more notable because he's less heinous in his movie version. Technically. I'm pretty sure both the movie and game Shadow are on the same like power level, but let's get to that a different time. Also forgot to point out that Knuckles has a good redemption. And like I said, Shadow's never really represented as evil ever again. Especially after like the 3rd game. If I'm correct, this redemption lasts is like Sonic 3 and Knuckles. The fact I'm mentioning a Sonic redemption without mentioning a Mario redemption that's good. I hardly know any Mario redemptions that are good because most of the villains are on and off at times, meaning that they'll be heroes sometimes, and sometimes they'll be villains. Especially when it comes to like being for the most part. But what are some examples I forgot to include? Well, I'm not included, but like there are actually some examples I forgot to bring up. Amity's one of them. I think we all know how Amity's redemption's good because her actions aren't too bad. She just amounts to just being a bully. But keynote that Amity's mom does raise her to be a bully, but she treats Luz and everyone around her pretty better, even to the point where Luz and Amity became a couple. Yeah, celebrate Owl House community and the LGBT community. Wink. And speaking of people who don't really have their actions go too bad, this is probably the most underrated example on the list, but I mentioned this in the announcement video quite a few times, actually. But I think Vidya's redemption from the Great Fairy Rescue was probably one of the better redemptions I've ever seen. Because just like Amity, Vidya just amounts to just being a jerk to everybody. And she gets along better with Tink over time as the films go on. So I can instantly mark this one as a good one. And ever since, Vidya has toned down being rude quite a lot. Because at least unlike Zarina, Vidya does appear multiple times. So she has a chance to be a kinder individual. And they do more with her. Yeah, This might be a rare instance where I'm talking about the Tinkerbell movies, but there's some other examples I did write down, like Anxiety from Inside Out 2, Sunset from Rainbow Rocks, which I'll explain this one, because unlike Starlight, Sunset actually had some signs of changing. And it gave her a good amount of character development in Rainbow Rocks. So her redemption is good right there. Also, speaking of Amity, Hunter's redemption is solid. Also did write down Mirage. Mirage cutting ties with Syndrome is arguably, in my opinion, the most satisfying part in the original Incredibles. And there's some other redemptions I also wrote, like Gru. I didn't write Megamind, but like Gru and Megamind's redemptions are pretty similar, so I didn't have to write Megamind. They both started off as evil, but become better on with the time. But Megamind is a much like better hero, in my opinion, than Gru. So at least Gru started to become a better parent towards Margot, Edith, and Agnes. He also wrote down Mr. Wolf from The Bad Guys 2022 and Diego from Ice Age. Also wrote down Isabella, because unlike Abuela, Isabella didn't do anything too bad or wasn't... I mean, yes, she was a little rude to Mirabelle, don't get me wrong, but like, some can't argue it is for a good reason. So I don't blame those who say that, you know, it is for a good... So I don't blame y'all. Also, I did write down Leonard's redemption because unlike Zeta, whereas her actions did go too far, while one can't say the same thing about Leonard trying to cook like hundreds of eggs in the first movie, in the second movie, he's past that. Yeah, sure, he doesn't regret it according to the inconsistently a Marble wiki, but Leonard didn't go back to evil after like keeping his word with Red, Chuck, Bomb, Silver, the other birds. This is probably the first time that Roville's ever redeemed someone in a good way. Because speaking of which, I'm also mixed with the redemptions in Epic, like King Pig and Prince Porky. Like, they had the same plans on trying to cook the eggs. But since Prince Porky, Piggy, and Jones both help out with the Chronicle Caves, I guess the redemptions aren't too bad. Plus, Prince Porky also helped out with Wiz Pig. You know, the final boss before he gets to Chronicle Cave. I guess those redemptions are solid enough. Especially when Piggy and Jones is more of a minor character. And all of this is just make-believe. It's just that these pigs just beat up the birds. Like, they don't really die or anything. They're just brutally injured. Because I feel like all of this is just make-believe at this point. It feels like it takes place in a book or something. Rather, it feels like a book that happened inside of a game or something. I don't know. But hey, that's all the redemptions I had. In a pinned comment, I do have a list of redemptions that I did leave out. Here's some of the ones I didn't mention. Those are Snowball from Secret Life, Judge Peckinpah from the original Angry Birds movie, 4 from the post-split. People said 4 from the post-split had a terrible redemption. Some people say 4 was worse in the post-split than in the pre-split. While one Reddit post did say he did act kind of the same. Nah, there's a difference between post-split 4 and pre-split 4 and Teapot 4. It's just that Teapot 4 is more similar to the pre-split 4 than the post-split because he's somewhat more rude. Plus, although to be fair, 4 being rude is sometimes reasonable. Like how he yells about the fact that 40 people quit for someone that they barely even knew at all. So 4 calling this part out is actually reasonable, since the split alone is probably the most controversial thing that happened in BFB history. I did mention Starlight. An article mentions this too. I did mention Felix. I did mention Alma as well, because she literally banished Bruno, if I'm right. If I'm right, she did do that. Which, not gonna lie, as good as We Don't Talk About Bruno is as a song, like, telling you, the grandma was pretty harsh. So, her redemption is automatically horrible for right there. And her so-called apology doesn't make up for anything. But this is too minor of a nitpick, since Encanto is still a good film regardless. But like I said, let me know in the reply to the pinned comment about any redemptions that you think were good, ones you're mixed with, and tell me why you're mixed with them or you feel like they're good or bad. And happy Cinco de Mayo, everyone. And by the way, happy Revenge of the 5th. Get it? Because it's May 5th, Revenge of the 5th. Yeah, I think you guys get it. Bye, everyone.